Hey guys, Tom Barclay here. It's the morning after the night before when Spurs lost 1-0 at Bournemouth, and we saw those scenes at full time where Ange Postecoglou had a bit of a altercation with some angry travelling fans who gave him quite a bit of abuse, to be honest. Looking at some of the footage on social media more specifically, and looking at some of the things that were said in his direction. We then had the press conference at Tottenham this morning back in Enfield. It's been quite a turnaround in a short space of time. If I look knackered, that's probably the reason why, coming in late from Bournemouth last night, then going off to Spurs the next day. But yeah, we heard from Ange this morning. So on a range of different subjects as he previewed the Chelsea game on Sunday. First thing that we had to start with is back to the supporters, really. He was asked many more questions about that particular incident at the end of the game and his relationship with supporters. And I guess some of the top lines, some of it was a bit repetitive from the actual post-match press conference, but the sort of fresh stuff from him today, I think the most interesting line that's been picked up a little bit, or one of, is him saying that when he was asked about whether he felt the majority of the fans are still behind him, he said, "They're not behind me, they're behind the club. I've got no interest in who's behind me." And some people have sort of seemed to pick that up as if he doesn't care what the fans think. I read that more as him saying what matters is being behind the club. It's kind of irrelevant about people being behind me. It's about what the club are doing, rather than a sort of any kind of swipe at supporters in any way. But those were his literal words. He mentioned something that I kind of talked about in the video that I did after the game about how these were the away fans who pay a lot, who pay a lot of money following the team up and down the country and abroad as well. So maybe this was a bit more significant, this kind of reaction, rather than just keyboard warriors or even some home games. And he said the same thing. He said, these were the hardcore away fans. So making this point, so he felt like he should hear it, he should listen to it. And it was sort of put to him some of the things that were said towards him, because if you remember after the game he said that he didn't like some of the things that were said, and he wouldn't go into detail over what was said, but he didn't like it, but that he had to cop it. And looking at some of the footage, I mean, probably expletive laden stuff. I mean, no fans get frustrated, but I don't think it's really acceptable saying certain words towards in his direction. I mean, I've been around football for long enough to know that it happens a lot. It happens throughout games, so it'd be pretty naive not to realise that, but it doesn't make it okay, to be honest, from my point of view. But he himself said he wasn't going to call it unacceptable. Said he wasn't hurting. He understands, where it all comes from, and he's just determined to turn it around. He was asked, with Chelsea coming up, which is such a huge fixture on Sunday, is it sort of the time to show what Spurs are all about? Because we know under Postecoglou has been proven against Man City, and in other games when they're on it, they can beat anyone. And it would be very, very Tottenham, very Ange Postecoglou's Tottenham to go through a little run like they have and then go and beat Chelsea on Sunday. But he said sort of yes to a certain extent, but he wasn't. He said that wouldn't eliminate what happened last night, i.e. the Bournemouth game. He wasn't going to downplay the significance of that result and particularly that performance. And one good win against a good side like Chelsea is not going to erase all that. So I would say fair play to acknowledging that and not suggesting that it was all going to be a magic one result against Chelsea changing everything. And I think, to be honest, that would, if he had said that would have fans wouldn't take him well to that. They're not stupid. They go to each match. They follow it all. They realise at this point that the inconsistency is the big part of it. It's hard to get as excited as they normally would be by a result like Man City when you follow it up with draw against Fulham and then lose away to Bournemouth, or precede it with a defeat against Ipswich. He is well aware of his the struggles of his team when it comes to consistency, and how that's, at times it looks like that if it does go south for him, that will be the undoing of him. But obviously he's not at that point at this stage, and he's with all these games that come so thick and fast, as the cliche is at this stage of the season. There is ample time to sort of turn it around. He was asked about how he deals with defeats, because Ange Postecoglou is known as being he has his team, but obviously every time he goes, as in his sort of coaching staff, but he isn't someone who goes into each club bringing many coaching staff with him, like you might see with like a Ruben Amorim at Man United, for example. He often creates a new coaching staff when he arrives at a club, and he likes, the reason for that, he likes to keep things fresh. He likes to feel like it brings new ideas to him, but that means that perhaps he doesn't have like a long-standing like ally like a lot of managers do, who can sort of share those moments when it's not going so well as the highs when it is going well. And he was asked like how he copes with that, and does he keep it all on him, and he said, yeah, it is all on me. There's no point in palming it off to someone else when it's not going well. And you know that's the life of a Premier League manager, and they're well compensated for it, so they have to deal with it. But you do wonder, you know, that kind of pressure, what it must be like to deal with. Must be tough. I mean, not to try and overplay how tough it must be compared to some of the people's general livelihoods out there. It's a privileged position, like I say, well rewarded position, but that doesn't mean that it's easy by any stretch. And you know, with so many games and so many decisions to be made and so much pressure, it must be hard on him right now, I would have thought. But that is how it goes, and that's what you sign up to be when you're a Premier League manager. Specifically on injuries, you know, Ben Davies, we knew it'd be too early. He's going to have a scan today, so he didn't have any updates on how bad that hamstring injury is, but you can pretty much guarantee he's going to be out of the game on Sunday, which leaves Spurs, you know, in a real pickle at centre back, because Cristian Romero, if he's not fit, and it's very much a doubt at the moment, he is due to train on Saturday. So today is pretty much recovery day, so not much is planned, but he is due to train on Saturday. So if he can come through that, then there's a chance he could play. And you think with their issues and the fact that it's Chelsea, there's a good chance of that, because otherwise you're talking Archie Gray at centre-back, who, you know, made his Premier League first start against Bournemouth. That was a lot, and it felt like I'm not saying he personally struggled, but you could feel the lack of a Ben Davies or a Romero van der Ven in that side against Bournemouth. So that would be quite scary coming up against Cole Palmer and Nicholas Jackson, to be honest. Like he's a real top player now, or at least seems to be at the moment, along with all of Chelsea's other players. So I guess we'll wait to see on team selection on that front. And on that note, perhaps maybe the most interesting line, and maybe the thing that I'll sort of take most from this particular video, he was asked by my friend Ali Gold about the transfer decisions to sign teenagers in the summer. Now, remember in the summer, they signed Dominic Solanke for 65 million, which was the most any Premier League side paid for one player this summer. So that should not be overlooked. That was a significant outlay. And they also brought Werner back on loan. So those two have got significant experience. But after that, you're talking players with very limited top-level experience. They're all teenagers. Archie Gray for 40 million effectively, 30 plus 10 million for Rodon. 18-year-old signed from Leeds. A really exciting prospect, as we can all see, but had only played in the Championship. Lucas Bergvall, you know, they managed to convince him to sign ahead of Barcelona, so clearly his stock is really high, but he'd only have played in Djurgården in the Swedish league, also 18. Jan Min-hyuk, who hasn't actually arrived yet, will be turning up this month and will hope to be involved in January, but you know, you're talking about a squad player at best at this stage, who hadn't actually arrived yet from South Korea. And then Wilson Odobert, 19-year-olds for a big outlay, 30-odd million from Burnley. It's about 100 million on that front, and I don't think any Spurs fans will say, not be excited to a certain extent to their potential, but the argument, and to me seems quite a fair one, is that whole policy seemed to be looking very much to the future rather than the here and now. And not to say that it's not a right thing to build a club for the future. I mean, Chelsea are an example of doing that, but you shouldn't sort of completely overlook right now as well. And it seems like with their squad so stretched right now due to injuries, which have been unfortunate, but historically Postecoglou's teams have suffered injuries, so it's not completely unexpected. And plus you've got players like Richarlison who just seem to get injured quite a lot and seem to be honest, at this stage, a bit injury prone. So you can kind of count on that. You should not be not counting on that given the history there. Was it the right decision to do that, to go down this route? And he sort of completely hit back on that. He defended the approach, his approach in his words, but also the club's approach, saying it was the right thing to do, still the right decision, because the way he sees when he's a manager at a club, he doesn't see it as if he's going to be there for just that one season, like I suppose probably Antonio Conte did. He sees it as building for the future, and as if he's going to be there for a long time. And if he felt more if he felt more worried about his own position and his own existence, I think he said, then he would have fought tooth and nail, he said, to keep Harry Kane at the club because of obviously such a top player. But he realised it was the right thing to do to sell him because of his contract situation. And that's why he feels that it was still the right thing to sign these young players, because they will bear fruit. The big question, obviously lead off from that, really, which he couldn't, he wasn't put to him, but he wouldn't be able to answer, but is on sort of everyone's lips, is will Ange Postecoglou be around to witness that potential bear fruit? Right now, it feels very much a bit up in the air, given the way things are going. I'm not saying that there's any sort of decision that's being close to being made by any stretch, but I'm just saying the way things are going, it's a concerning time for him. And you look at the players that went out the door. Yes, Pierre-Emile Højbjerg was not every Spurs fan's favourite player. And anyone who's trying to rewrite history over how important he was might sort of look back at some of the various tweets that went out at the time whenever Højbjerg played. But he was an experienced pro. Think of Marseille away. Not only did he score the goal, but he really sort of dragged Tottenham through in that particular result. And he was brilliant against England in the Euros when Denmark held us to a draw. I remember being at that game too. But not just him, Emerson Royal, again, not everyone's Spurs fans' favourite player, but a dedicated pro who could play in different positions, but crucially had experience. Lo Celso, we never saw the best of him, but has experience. Would have been in that World Cup winning team probably if he wasn't injured. And they let them all go out the door with these youngsters coming through. So I understand fans sort of querying that and whether that was the right call. I suppose you've got to look at it, that's what the club chose to do. They chose to bring in a project manager who was going to try and develop these kind of young players. Now, when it's going badly, like it has been for the last couple of games, and maybe frustratingly throughout the lack of consistency this season, it feels like you need to keep your resolve at that point and back what you initially started out to do. And I think a lot of fans, hearing a lot of the feedback from that last video, got a lot of comments on that one. I mean, some of them seem to have had enough of Ange. To be honest, some people seem to be not seeing like it can turn around long term, that his methods are going to work. But a lot are in the camp of you've got to see this through, you've got to stick with it. What's the point in keeping changing managers? So I guess we'll wait to see what happens on that front. But look, they've got Chelsea first, which is another great chance. As every game of the season, it seems to be that we say, what a big game. But this one really feels like a big opportunity. Just finally, before I go on to that, he was asked about feeling like support from above, effectively. And he said, I don't need to support. He's not about that. He's never one to sort of put it on the club, in fairness to Postecoglou, like perhaps Conte had intimated before, or downright said, to be honest, at times towards the end of his tenure. He's very much talking about how Postecoglou how it's on him to work his backside off and turn it around. So Chelsea, I mean, whenever we look back on his Postecoglou tenure, whether it's 5 years, whether it's a year, however long his spell is, this game will probably be one of the standout matches. The game last season, that is, from his time. If anything, it was the most fascinating Premier League game of the season, definitely from Spurs' point of view. Albeit that Man City game where they lost with the Arsenal situation was probably up there as well. It's my dog barking in the background, so hopefully you didn't hear that, or hopefully he'll pipe down after this. But yeah, the 4-1 back in November, about 13 months ago. Spurs hadn't lost the Premier League game before then, unbeaten in 10, top of the league, unbelievable start for Postecoglou. Then they play Chelsea. They start brilliantly, Kulusevski scoring, and then it all goes absolutely Pete Tong, as we might say in England. Romero gets sent off, Udogie gets sent off, Maddison gets injured and is out for a few months. And to be honest, has he ever been the same player since? Maybe only in fits and starts, but generally not as consistent by any stretch. Van der Ven gets injured, who's their best player of the season. Absolutely hammer blow. Chelsea go on to win the game 4-1, but that does not tell the story of the game, because Postecoglou, despite having 9 men, continues to go for it. And at 2-1 in the 90th minute, Son has a chance to make it 2-2. And Eric Dyer as well has a goal ruled out for offside. So they almost came away with it. But Chelsea missed chance after chance after chance going through that high line. Eventually, Nicholas Jackson gets a hat-trick. Nicholas Jackson back then was a completely different player, confidence-wise, than he is now. Perhaps that game was quite crucial to his own development, but that's a different story. But at the end of the game, you've got everyone kind of in disbelief over what they've just witnessed, never seen it before. Remember, Spurs had played Liverpool at home just a few weeks before, where Liverpool went down to 9 men, and they did what most teams do, and they just tried to defend their way out of it, and almost got a result until Matip scores an own goal in the 95th minute. But this is something we've never seen before, and Spurs fans are on their feet applauding the team for their bravery, applauding the manager for his courage and bringing something we've never seen before. This is the height of the "we're loving Big Ange instead" stuff at the end of home games, and just the loving for him. Fast forward 13 months and how things have changed. But like anything with any manager, it's always down to results. If you play good football, that gives you a bit more of a stay of execution. So the ones that don't play exciting, entertaining football have a little less time on their hands in that front. But it always comes down to results. And when you analyse the results, since that game, they've won in the league. They've won 17 games, they've drawn 6, and they've lost 18 games. And that is, stats will show you a lot about Postecoglou. You can play them any way you want. You can look at the first 50 league games and say he had more than Arteta, less than Klopp, but not in a bad situation. But then you look at those stats and they don't make for happy reading either. So I'm not going to delve too much into them, but they do underline why fans are frustrated, along with this sort of the overarching thing being the consistency. But I think part of me is just a little bit sad, I suppose, as a fan of Postecoglou, to think that loving that he had then, I don't know. It feels like he needs to get through this period and probably win a competition for him to restore that kind of love. It feels a long, long way away from where we were then. And it's on him to get it back, but it remains in serious doubt at the moment whether that can be brought back. But look, they've just got to start with the next game. It's Chelsea. Looking at Chelsea, got some great, exciting young players. Tottenham have signed a lot of young players, but Chelsea have spent, serious more amount of money on young players, and it's starting to bear fruit, to use Ange's phrase. Enzo Maresca's done a fantastic job. I remember being at Chelsea, Man City, in the opening day of the season when they lost 2-0 against City. They weren't great, but they weren't terrible. But that was the day that Sterling suddenly was out of the squad, having been a big part of the team during pre-season. He had all these players, like Chilwell, Chukwuemeka, all these good English players in particular, a bloated squad, Chalobah, and you were wondering, how is he ever going to turn it around? And he obviously won the league with Leicester, but he had some ropey moments during that season. But you've got to say, hats off to him. He's had a fantastic job so far. He's managed to trim down the squad to the point where pretty much what his first team's going to be, barring the odd player here and there, which, Sancho versus Neto or whoever it is out wide. But generally you can see how they're going to play. Suddenly you've got competition for Jackson with Nkunku coming to the party. Enzo Fernandez is playing brilliantly. And they're even getting clean sheets as well at the moment, and just look really, really ruthless team. Obviously they're playing in the Europa Conference League, which you can tell how much they care or don't care about it by the fact that Cole Palmer's not even in the squad there. But it means they completely rotate their side, so they're fresh for the league games, unlike Spurs, who can't do that with Europa League. Even if Ange does change his team up a bit, it's not to the same extent. And that's really working for Chelsea. Chelsea generally play pretty well when they come to Spurs. So it is a tough fixture, a really tough fixture. And normally you might think, well, it's Ange's Spurs, they can pull a result out. And I still believe that, but they just looked tired. They looked tired against Bournemouth. They look like I do right now. They look tired. And they're stretched, and they're defensively, stretched in particular. They're missing key players. Bentancourt's a huge miss, isn't he? Obviously, the defenders, Vicario, Forster's played well, but Vicario is such an influence as well. And in attacking options, they just don't have that depth on the bench now. Say what you want about Richarlison, but when he plays, and I know it's not often enough, he can make an impact. And missing him is proving to be difficult right now, and players like Son are out of form. I personally am struggling a bit to see how Spurs go and win this game. I'm actually not at the game. I should drop that on you now. I've had a weekend booked off for about 6-7 months in the diary. It just happens to be this game, and it's frustrating to miss it, particularly with it being a big game, but also with the context of how it's going at the moment. It feels like one that I would like to be there at. I might still do a video afterwards if I manage to watch it on TV. We'll see. Yeah, massive Spurs. Just finally looking at the lineup. Forster in goal, obviously. I imagine he'd go Porro and Udogie. The only reason he might change it up is just due to tiredness, perhaps. I know a lot of fans have been calling for Jed Spence, but the way Postecoglou's been talking about Spence in recent weeks, to be honest, doesn't make me think he's any closer to starting a Premier League game. Even though he went over to try and be almost the peacemaker in that altercation with fans with Postecoglou the other day. I'm backing Romero, I think, but it's a toss-up. Who knows? If it's not Romero, then you think pretty much Archie Gray will start at centre-back with Radu Dragozin. Basuma, you presume, would be holding midfielder. I wouldn't be surprised if Maddison got dropped after that particular Bournemouth performance, because it's not just him not being that effective. It's his main problem is Kulusevski. Kulusevski was back on the right and just didn't really have the same impact as in the middle. So I would fancy him to come back into the middle. And can you play the two of them against Chelsea? I'm not sure. But then again, Pape Sarr had a poor game against Bournemouth too. So we'll wait to see. But I would maybe think Kulusevski and Sarr. Johnson back to the right, where he's far more effective. Son, I presume, will come back in on the left side, albeit he really needs to start playing better. Spurs really need their captain to start hitting some form. And then Solanke up front, who will hopefully be better for the Bournemouth game after missing Fulham with illness, although I would worry it might go the other way, that he might have had so much taken out of him against Bournemouth, his old club, that he might be pretty tired when it comes to Chelsea. And the same could be said for a lot of the Spurs squad. They're stretched, they're tired, they're up against it, so's the manager. Let's see if they can confound expectations as they have done before and change this whole direction of travel of the Postecoglou project, because he needs it badly.